Iran is in a tailspin. Nationwide protests, triggered by inflation, unpaid wages, and collapsing living standards, have spread across major cities. The rial has lost over 90% of its value since 2018. Inflation is estimated at 40 to 50%. Youth employment remains in double digits, and oil revenues, while higher, are still constrained by sanctions and payment bottlenecks. The protests have quickly turned political, or about the lack of a political voice. By Iran's standards, they have taken outrageous forms. One example is the viral photograph of a woman smoking a cigarette holding a picture of the cleric leader Ayatollah Khamenei in flames. The crackdown has been unusually severe, with mass arrests, fast-track trials, and reported deaths. Outside, Iran's strengths have depleted. Its nuclear file is frozen, and its confrontation with Israel, largely fought through proxies, is edging closer to direct retaliation. Embassies are issuing evacuation advisories. Yesterday, the Indian government asked all its nationals in Iran to leave immediately. For India, even though it trades little with Iran, this isn't entirely distant. You see, Iran sits astride the Strait of Hormuz, through which flows 1/5 of global oil. Any disruption raises India's import bills, fuels inflation, and hits the rupee. What's more, India's exporters, especially basmati rice traders, are already seeing payments stall. And long-term bets like Chabahar Port, they obviously become harder to operationalize in a volatile Iran. So, how did we come to this, and what lies ahead? Let's find out. It's Friday, the 16th of Jan. I'm Anirban Chowdhury. This is the Morning Brief. To help us make sense of this moment, I'm joined by Kabir Taneja, strategic analyst and deputy director at Observer Research Foundation, who tracks West Asia security and political shifts very closely. Hi Kabir, very warm welcome to the Morning Brief.
Thank you so much.
For starters, Kabir, why don't you locate the Iran crisis in three key critical problems?
Right. So, of course, the Iran crisis is a conglomeration of many such smaller crises over the past 3 decades. But in the immediate past, the US bombing of Iran and Iran's nuclear program last year, along with Israel, really shattered a long-held marketed belief by the Iranian government that there was a sense of invincibility to Iran since the 1979 revolution and since the Ayatollah has been in power. So Ayatollah Khamenei was in power till about 1989, and Ayatollah Khamenei, who's still in power, took over after that. So, in essence, basically only two power centers have existed in Iran since 1979.
Right.
And that the illusion was shattered last year. Second is a very recent phenomenon, which was a water shortage that hit Tehran in about October, November, which really stressed the government to population relationship as the capital ran out of basically water supply. The people really started getting agitated at the government's failure to provide basic necessities. And of course, there are n number of other economic and political issues that really came together on the back of that water shortage in the capital to really push some of these protests through. And third was, I think, a little bit more of a strange push that happened. The previous Shah of Iran, his son, who now lives in the US, made a call for protesters in Iran to take to the streets on back of some of these public grievances. And we saw many pro-monarchists or pro-Shah citizens and people who took to the streets to protest against the regime and calling for the return of monarchy. So not necessarily a democracy or a republic, but a monarchy. So I think these are the three fundamental things that have happened in the past about 1 to 2 years that have led to the protest that we are seeing at this point of time.
What is materially different about Iran's behavior this time compared to other flare-ups? Would you say the power shift has made that difference?
Look, I don't think there are too many fundamental changes per se. The
Okay.
Iranian government has been as liberal or with using force as it has been in the past setups of such protests. The last big protest was the 2022 one, where a woman was killed in Iran, and it became sort of like this feminist movement led by the Iranian women against the regime. But that really didn't go anywhere. And now we are in 2026. And again, we are seeing this trend that the government has used force to quell these protests for the time being. But I think the things that have changed right now is that the Iranian system is on a much weaker pedestal than it has ever been in the past, largely thanks to the previous, as we mentioned before, the previous year's actions by the US, by Israel, and by other sort of international agencies when it comes to sanctions. So, the Iranian system is on a weaker ken at this point of time. I think the Iranian government will come out on the other side, fairly still stable and in power, but it will fundamentally change how they look at these protests and how they are going to perceive them if they continue to happen on a yearly basis in the time to come.
And do you see a more permanent shift in, therefore, West Asian security?
Look, the West Asian security actually gets more complicated, right?
Yeah.
Because, for example, a lot of the Arab countries, Arab powers such as Saudi Arabia and the UAE, don't get along that well with Iran. But I am pretty sure at this point of time and at this juncture, they would not want to see a collapse of the state of Iran. Because that really leads to a big question mark of what comes after the current system, which has been there since 1979, if it collapses. I don't think there is any clarity on who is going to take charge. As we talked about the Shah's son, well, he's in the US. He's not even inside Iran right now. And the opposition of the current administration of Iran is very fragmented and fractured. Even the moderates, if you think about it, the current President Pezeshkian was a moderate, and he was elected by the people of Iran. But even they are more supportive of continuing the current political systems inside Iran for the time being. They are supporting Ayatollah's call for the protests to be clamped down upon. And a lot of young people in Iran actually voted for the moderates, exactly to not support this kind of politics. So it gets even much more complicated, as we are going forward within the Iranian structure. And if, let's say, hypothetically tomorrow, the current administration was to collapse, I think it is going to only lead to chaos for the time being and for the foreseeable future. And as there is no sort of transitional political entity, leader, or party waiting on the sidelines to take over.
What about Iran's proxies? I mean, does the country still benefit from having armed groups act on its behalf without Tehran being directly blamed?
I think the groups are on the back foot. I think, or since October 7th attack against Israel, Israel has launched a fierce campaign, which has not just stopped in Lebanon against Hezbollah or in Gaza against Hamas.
Hamas.
It has directly targeted even the Houthis in Yemen.
Yep.
It has targeted entities in Syria and Iraq as well. And it has targeted Iran directly. So a lot of these groups have been diminished. A lot of these groups have lost their capacity. They've lost their leadership, and they're on the back foot at this point of time. So the entire project of Iran, which was, sort of the moniker was given the axis of resistance, and that idea is in shambles right now. While this really figures well for regional countries like the Arab powers, but for Iran, the entire construct has been not neutralized, but it's significantly downtrodden at this point of time. But having said that, a lot of these groups, you have to remember that these groups may have been supported by Iran in one form or the other, but they all have their own identities. They all have their own ideologies, and they're like hydras, right? You try to stamp something down on one side, and it comes up on the other side again. So on the proxies, I think we will have to wait and watch and see what kind of impact Iran on the back foot will have going forward.
Got it. Let's come to India, and let's start with the biggest trade oil choke point, which is the Strait of Hormuz. How realistic is the risk of disruption, and would it mean, dire consequences or serious consequences for Indian?
This is a question that comes up a lot on choke point politics and how Iran plays it. And Iran plays it well in the sense that whenever this kind of crisis comes up, someone or the other within the Iranian system will say, well, if we are on the back foot or we are put in a position we will block Strait of Hormuz. That means the global oil supply will go for a toss. But we have to remember that has actually never happened in history. So Iran has never acted upon in a way where it has mobilized its naval forces to try and block the Strait of Hormuz. So if it happens now, that will be an absolutely a moment that has not happened before. From an Indian point of view, Iran was always a big oil supplier, but it hasn't been so since about 2016, 2017
Right.
to sanctions. So if today, let's say, Strait of Hormuz was choked or was blocked out by Iran, I don't think oil supplies will be a huge impact to India, but I think oil prices can be. There, supplies, I think India diversified very successfully since 2016, 2017. We buy from Iraq, we buy from Saudi Arabia, we go to Angola, Nigeria, wherever it is available, we go and purchase oil. Russia has entered the fray over the past couple of years. But, if Strait of Hormuz is blocked, I think prices of oil can shoot up. And that means that India is spending many more billions of dollars in securing supplies as far as cost is concerned. And that automatically means more inflation and more problems domestically.
You spoke about how Israel's retaliation has, put all these on the back foot. What about Gulf countries? I mean, are they also recalibrating their stance? And separately, do you see US intervention actually happening?
Look, let me answer the second question first. And that's largely because, look, at this point of time, we really can't say whether the US intervention will happen or not. It completely depends on the whimsies of President Trump. And as we all know, that is very difficult to read what President Trump is going to do. Over the past 24 hours, we saw Iran's foreign minister, Saeed Abbas Araghchi, go on Fox News, in the US to basically say that there are no plans of public executions against protesters and so on and so forth in Iran. And as a result of that claim or that statement, President Trump has already said that, look, we think that the Iranians are not going to do any such kind of violence, which can be translated into that military action may not be coming anytime soon. Because it's going to be a very big issue if that happens. That doesn't sell very well with Trump's MAGA core base, which is against foreign intervention, sending troops to foreign wars and so on and so forth.
Correct.
So look, the Gulf countries are safe to say fairly worried because last time this kind of adventurism happened in 2025, the American base in Qatar was attacked by the Iranians. And the Iranians made it clear this time also that if such adventurism is conducted, US base which are peppered around the Gulf countries will be targeted. And since this has happened in the past, Iran has shown that if it is put in that box and into that corner, then all bets are off. So there is genuine worry because, if you see Saudi Arabia, which is on a different path of economic development, making this very treacherous journey, moving away from its addiction to oil dollars into a more manufacturing and service-based economy for the future, all that requires stability. So I think actually Gulf countries would be whispering in President Trump's ear in Washington, D.C. to dissuade him from conducting any military outreach into Iran right now.
Finally, Kabir, what are the 2 or 3 ways in which you see the situation panning out in the next 2-3 weeks? And is there an escalation that we as India should be worried about?
Look, it's very difficult to crystal ball gaze into the Middle East. That's something I've learned over the past couple of years covering this region. But at this point of time, I think the Iranians are looking for a way to de-escalate the situation. I also think that the protests, which are ongoing right now, will be quelled by the Iranian authorities in one way or the other, which has happened into most similar protest movements of the past. But I think one thing that we should all keep an eye on is what happens inside Iran in the next couple of months now. Because the Iranian government is on the back foot. And any government on the back foot is usually erratic and is very difficult to predict. So keeping that in mind, I think the story may unravel inside Iran again more than anything regional or anything that sort of gets expanded into the Gulf countries and so on and so forth. But any sort of sudden overnight expectation that a revolution is going to pull down the regime, we have to always calculate that what comes next. And right now, no one has any idea what would come next.
Kabir, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Kabir's point is a sobering one. This may not end in dramatic escalation or sudden regime change, but in uncertainty. An Iranian state on the back foot is often unpredictable, and that unpredictability matters more than headlines about revolution or war. Iran is wobbling, and in West Asia, wobble is usually enough to move markets, policies, and people. That's it for today. You were listening to this episode of The Morning Brief. It was produced by me and sound designed by Rajas Naik. A new episode of The Morning Brief drops every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, wherever you get your podcasts. Keep listening.